There's a time for living. The time keeps on flying.
Today marks the gruesome anniversary of the Manson Murders. On late August 8th and 9th in 1969, 7 brutal murders in Los Angeles sent the city into a complete panic. Sales of guns, dogs, and alarm systems soared as authorities used every tool in their arsenal to figure out who was responsible for these horrific murders. What followed next was a massive investigation that eventually led to the arrests of a sadistic cult known as the Manson family. On today's show, we'll be taking a deep dive into what happened on those 2 horrific nights with Manson expert Scott Michaels.
Just to say your love's not enough.
All right, guys, my guest this afternoon, Scott Michaels, is known worldwide for being the foremost expert on the Manson murders, as well as the driving force behind the documentary 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter, which is available for free online. I highly recommend it. He is also the owner and operator of the tour company in Hollywood called Dearly Departed Tours. You can visit his museum with where he has some amazing souvenirs of Hollywood celebrities who died under mysterious circumstances. Scott also has an incredible podcast called the Dearly Departed Podcast, which is mind-blowing. As if that's not enough, he really does know where all the bodies are buried. He's the founder of findadeath.com, and he happens to be the guru on all things related to the dark side of Hollywood. Please be sure to visit his informative website at dearlydepartedtours.com. I'm stoked to have this gentleman on my show this afternoon, Mr. Scott Michaels. Scott, first of all, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Wow, thanks for that terrific introduction, man. I'm impressed with myself. That's very kind of you.
Well, listen, it's all true because I'm a big fan of yours. And like I said earlier, I mean, I listen to your podcast, and unfortunately, I was out in LA last year, and I told you I couldn't do the tour because I had a previous engagement, and I wanted to do it so bad, and now the tour, I was going to come out there this year to do it, but the silly, stupid thing is going on right now. But anyway, Scott, for my audience who don't know what you do or who you are, talk a little bit about what you do.
Well, I've been in business in sort of the dark side of Hollywood for about 26 years now. Wow. I moved to Los Angeles in 94 to take over a company called Graveline Tours, which was really the granddaddy of all this sort of business. It was a hearse-driven tour through, the dark side of Hollywood. I ran that company for a few years. I moved to England, and while I was gone, the company went under. So when I returned to Los Angeles a few years later, I started my own company called Dearly Departed Tours. And I've been doing it for about 16 years on my own. I started Find a Death while I was away in Britain, actually. I wanted to show people online where famous things happen, famous tragic things happen. It was right about the time when people were first getting home computers, so it kind of took off that way, and it gave me the confidence to start my own company. So I started Dearly Departed, and then, started collecting items, sort of things just kind of ended up in my possession, and sort of odd bits of Hollywood history, and we opened a museum a few years ago, and I was really proud of that collection. Still am proud of that collection.
What are some of the things you have there for my audience?
Well, probably, the first item I ever collected was actually a large portion of the fireplace from the Tate house where the Tate murders happened, or what is called the Manson Murders. That is when I collected, probably back in '93. But over the years, we've ended up with Mae West's dentures. We've ended up with just this week. I acquired the sink that Lucille Ball had in her home that she would dye her hair red in, and probably the largest item in our collection is the Jane Mansfield car that she was killed in 1967. So everything that isn't fastened down, and they tip the country on its side, it ends up over here, and the weirdest stuff ends up with me.
I believe you. I've heard you say that you have Yvette Vickers nail polish.
I have a lot of stuff from Yvette's house. Yeah,
really?
I have her measuring tape that I use every day. Because it's people alive in a weird way.
Right.
When I was, not that long ago, we went to see the King Tut exhibit downtown in Los Angeles, and I read something. I'd never read this before, but apparently it's an ancient Egyptian saying that a person will die 2 times. The first time they die is when they physically die. The second time they die, the last time they die is when their name is said out loud for the last time. So I figured these people were trendsetters. They were big Hollywood people in the day. They shouldn't be forgotten, even if they weren't, the Clark Gables and people like that. They were still there. They still put this town on the map, and they deserve to be remembered.
Yes. Here. Yeah, and I love what you do. It's I wait for your podcast to drop. To be honest with you, so Scott, well, as I said in your intro, you are pretty much the Manson expert, whether you like it or not. So let's get into Charles Manson. In 1967, Charles Manson gets released from prison and ends up at Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco. First off, what was he in jail for in 1967?
Boy, at that point, I think it was armed robbery, I believe. He was always, he was never in for really major things like auto theft, pimping and pandering. There was robbery, so that is major. I don't mean to say that it isn't, but parole violation, things like that. So Manson was in prison for about 5 or 6 years, and during that time is when the hippie movement kind of took off. So when he got out of prison and he went to San Francisco, he was like, "Whoa, this is something else, man. These people have a whole different attitude." And he was already in his 30s at this point. Most everyone else doing the partying and hanging out in the peace and love were in their early 20s and late teens. So Manson was looked on like the son of guru father figure, which flourished in that atmosphere.
Obviously he was charismatic in a bad way, but how did he get his followers to, in other words, how did he get that group put together?
Well, Manson knew how to get what he wanted from people. He was an expert manipulator, and he also used things like the Bible to, charm people. And he also, the Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I don't think Manson ever read a book in his life, but he learned from people. He gleaned facts from people, and he figured out a way to get people to do what he wanted them to do. So the girls, he said, "Oh, I want some girls around." So he stepped up and did his whole weird guru kind of talking, pontificating, and they were mesmerized by him. And Manson saw that as kind of, hey, this is really interesting. I like this gig. He had been around cults before, and he knew how charismatic people needed to be. He went to church, a Baptist church. It was quite a extreme sort of, hands in the air, talking in tongues kind of stuff. So he had been exposed to all of that stuff, and he just gathered it all and used it to his advantage. The drugs didn't hurt either. Manson hardly ever took drugs, but he made sure that everyone else did, and he messed with their minds while they were under the influence, and he knocked them down and to nothing and started it all up again.
I want to get into his music career real quick if we can. I mean, I get this from you anyways. Obviously. There were stories that he played the Whiskey Go-Go. Did he work there or try to get on stage?
No, he did audition to play the Whiskey once, and he was a Klingon. He was a wannabe. He sure wanted to be in the music business, but he just wasn't good enough. And he really was attracted to that lifestyle, which is how he kind of gravitated towards Dennis Wilson. He was a songwriter, Manson, and the songs weren't terrible, but they just weren't good. They weren't that good. So he never really had the stuff to do it. But he loved being on the periphery of all that. He could be as visible or as invisible as he wanted to be. And yeah, he was hanging out with everybody. The Beach Boys, Mama Cass. I mean, he knew them all. He was hanging out with them, and he was rubbing shoulders with all of them. But as I said, he liked kind of blending in. And so he had been to the Whiskey, of course, many times. And according to the owner of the Whiskey, Mario Magliari, he said that Manson auditioned, but he was rude to one of the waitresses. And he demanded that Manson apologize, and Manson refused. So this is the story that's in his book, Magliari's book. And he said he grabbed Manson by the scruff of his neck. He said about the waitress, "Why should I apologize? All I said was she would look good with an apple in her mouth." So Magliari took him by the back of his shirt and threw him out the door, and the exchange went I'm Jesus Christ, I can have you killed. And Magliari claims, he said, that makes me God, I win, go to hell. That was so Manson was he didn't want to conform to anyone else's idea of what he should be, which is probably one of the things that held him back. The Beach Boys wanted to record his music, but they wanted to change some of it, and Manson just wouldn't stand for it, even though they did it anyway.
So Scott, if we can, let's try to set up the scene at 10050 Cielo Drive on August 8th. What's going on with Sharon Tatum and her party that night? Where were they doing?
Well, it was a low key night. It was one of the hottest nights of the year. Sharon wasn't in a particularly terrific mood because she was hugely pregnant. And Abigail Folger and Wojciech Wachowski, they've been staying in the house while Roman and Sharon were gone that summer. They both were in Europe for a long time, and she returned to America to have the baby, and Roman was going to join her in a couple of weeks for the birth of the baby. So Abigail and Wojciech, as soon as Sharon got back, were going to leave, but Roman asked them to stay along for those couple of weeks until he returned. So according to most published sources, the four of them went to have dinner at the El Coyote restaurant and returned to the house, and Sharon was walking around in bra and panties, actually laying in bed with J.C. being her ex-boyfriend and close friend of her and Roman Polanski both. There was nothing going on between the two of them. They were very, very close. And he was literally just sitting at the edge of the bed talking to Sharon. Wojciech was passed out on the sofa. Abigail Folger was reading a book in bed. So it was all very, normal. Then everything, Tex Watson broke in, Susan Atkins gathered them up, and the mayhem occurred. And then poor Stephen Parent was just up there, visiting the caretaker in the guest house, which is about 20 yards away from the main residence. And he just happened to be there that night at that time and ended up being the most innocent, I think. I shouldn't even say that. You can't rate victims as far as their, what happened to them. But he was the one that had he was least likely to be up there. Right. And it was just a terrible situation for him that he just happened to be there at that time.
Scott, I want to back up a little bit if I can. Prior to the murders, the Manson family used to do what they call creepy crawls. Tell my audience, what were these creepy crawls?
Well, it's sort of an odd thing because Manson was a thief, and he was teaching these girls and guys to go into people's houses and steal things like money or just pointless things to see if they can get into houses and leave undetected. One of the houses they creepy crawled was owned by Jack Jones, who was the singer most famous for singing the Love Boat theme song. Yes. And he returned home while they were still in the house, and according to those people that were in the house, they hid in the bushes until the police arrived. And Jack Jones, all he realized was that his cowboy hat was missing. So, it was sort of odd, pointless things, but I think Manson was just trying to manipulate them to see what they could do, to see what they could get away with. And also there was always the robbery aspect of it, not on a large scale, jewelry, wallets, that kind of thing.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Scott. Was Charles Manson at the Tate House in March of '69?
Yes, he was. Because Manson had a friendly relationship. Well, a relationship with the former tenant, Terry Melcher, who was a record producer, produced the Byrds and Paul Revere and the Raiders. And he and Terry Melcher had a falling out because Manson, Manson, as I said, wasn't good enough. And people were humoring Manson because he was an interesting guy. He brought drugs and girls to the parties. And after a while, Manson just got too weird, and Terry Melcher didn't want anything more to do with him. And in the meantime, Terry Melcher moved out. So Sharon and Roman moved in February of 1969, and on March 23rd, 69, Charlie Manson went up to the house to confront Terry Melcher. And he knocked on the front door, and thinking he would find Terry Melcher, it ended up being Sharon's photographer. Sharon was in the living room at the time. And the photographer opened up the front door and said, Melcher doesn't live here anymore. And but right behind him stood Sharon. So 5 months before, she was murdered, Sharon Tate and Charles Manson looked into each other's eyes. Wow. So that's why people think that Terry Melcher was up at the house that night and he was the intended victim. That's not true. Manson knew that Melcher did not live in that house anymore.
So we know what Sharon and her friends were doing that night, Sebring and everybody in Folger. They all went to the El Coyote. Like you say, nobody saw them there that night. No witnesses.
Right.
So what was the family? What was the Manson family doing that day or that before that murders? Do we know?
Well, yeah, I mean, things kind of, hit the fan a couple of weeks prior to that, where there was another murder in Topanga Canyon near the Spahn Ranch where the family were living, a man by the name of Gary Hinman. And things just spiraled out of control. One of the people that was arrested, the main person that was arrested, was a friend of Manson's. And Manson was afraid that this guy was going to make a deal and throw Manson under the bus to get himself a better deal to get off of the murder of Gary Hinman. I doubt that would have even happened. But they say that Manson was, his main goal was to get this guy, Bobby, out of prison to save his own butt. And, it's so difficult to sum up in just a couple of seconds, and I hope that doesn't sound condescending. I certainly don't mean it to. There was a drug deal that went wrong. There were people that wanted money from Manson. Tex Watson, who was the main killer, he killed 6 of the 7 Tate LaBianca victims, owed Manson a favor, and Manson said, "Get money. I don't care how you do it, but get money." And he sent Tex and the girls up to that house, and Tex took it upon himself, I believe, to kill those people. It was just something that really was unplanned. People think it's some sort of mastermind race war. I'm not saying those words weren't thrown around at the ranch, but this thing spiraled out of control. Nobody knew what they were doing, and they were just taking it as it came, and it ended up being this horrific event.
So the reason why they picked that house because of Melcher.
Right. And there are those, again, pulling, these theories out of the air right now. Not out of the air. These are legitimate theories. Manson and Tex Watson and Wojciech Frykowski probably were involved on some level. And some people think that the murders up there were actually a hit on Wojciech Frykowski, and the rest of the people are collateral damage. Sharon was stabbed 16 times. Stephen Parent shot 4 times, stabbed once. Abigail Folger, 28. Wojciech was shot twice, stabbed 51 times, and beaten with a gun so hard it bent the barrel. So Wojciech was a crooked guy. I wouldn't say he was an up-and-up guy at all. He was dealing with a lot of scuzzy people, and some people think it was down to him.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Was Quincy Jones and Steve McQueen supposed to be there that night too?
All right. Well, do you want the list? Everyone claims was supposed to be at the house that night. Well, I mean, just a few. Rex Reed, Jacqueline Suzanne, Peter Fonda, a model by the name of Ava Roosevelt said her car broke down on the way.
Because
Steve McQueen.
There were reports that there was a party going on there.
There was no party, not that night. There have been parties there several times, but not that night, no. No, Sharon was walking around in bra and panties, and Wojciech was passed out on the sofa. So, no, there wasn't a party. But there's a lot of people that just want to think, it could have been me, kind of a thing. Some people straight up said they found the victims and left, which is just nonsense. But there's about 20 people that I can name. I have a list that I keep. The I was supposed to be at the house that night list. The claim they should have been there that night.
So this is what time was the murder? Do we have a time frame?
Well, Stephen Parent got there at 11:45. He was killed about 12:15. So they say between 12:15 and 12:45, roughly a half an hour to 40 minutes.
So this is what's great about you, because you know like everything. So a lot of people do not know this, but they also obviously leave there, and they stop at another house. What was the reasoning for that?
Well, the official story is that they were heading in their car and they were thirsty, and they wanted to make sure that they could, there wouldn't be any blood on them if they happened to get stopped by the police. So they supposedly chose a street at random, about a mile up Benedict Canyon called Portola Drive, and they got out and dragged the garden hose into the street and turned on the water and were hosing off of the driveway. Interestingly enough, the owner of the house came out and saw them and chased them away. They didn't put that together till December that it was actually the killers that he had chased away.
And why wasn't Manson there that night?
didn't do dirty work. Manson was so passive aggressive. Manson said, I never told anybody to kill anybody. I don't doubt that for a second. But Manson would also say things like, you know what you have to do, and hand him a knife. So, he would say things without saying them. And so that night, Tex, I believe that he said, Tex, go out, get this money, do whatever you need to do. I don't care what you need to do, but I want you to go up there and rob those people. And I do believe it was supposed to be a robbery that went haywire. That's my personal opinion. And the focal point being Wojciech Perkowski. That's what I feel.
In your one incredible documentary, 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter, you actually go to the spot where Tex went to Watson threw the gun out the window. And
yeah,
you actually
and the gun went undiscovered as well for quite a while, several months actually. A young boy by the name of Stephen Weiss was found it in his backyard. They were coming down a mountain, a very steep mountain, and threw the gun out the window of the car, and it landed on a hillside, and this little boy just happened to be playing there on the hillside, and he found it several months later. What's fascinating is that this gun was documented. It was in the LAPD's possession, and Mr. Bugliosi, the prosecutor, knew what the gun was, published photographs of the gun, not knowing they didn't even realize they had the gun already. And it took this little boy's parents to see it on the news to say, hey, I think that's the gun, and called the detectives. It's a bit more convoluted than that. But actually, I interviewed the young man, Stephen Weiss, who found the gun. That's on my YouTube channel. Nice guy, but just a bizarre little footnote of history.
Right. Yeah, it's there's so many layers to this. It's just incredible. And so they stop off, they hose off a little bit, they throw the gun out the window, and they stop for gas at a gas station. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that the same?
That is what the killers have relayed that information, have said that. Where that gas station is, I don't know. They don't know. It's just something I theorize just by location of where it might be. But I don't know exactly which one it was.
And that was this. Correct me if I'm wrong. Again, that was the same gas station that James Dean gassed up before he. Is that the same?
That's right. That's my theory, is that they stopped there because they wanted to look at the car and the light from the gas station to see if there was any blood in the seats or anything like that. So, and yes, as they would have passed, they certainly would have, one way or the other, passed that gas station. So I logistically put that together, and it was where Jimmy gassed up the morning he was killed in 1955. And interestingly, we lost that about a year ago to demolition for a new build.
I mean, what's going on in LA every week? I mean, I used to go there every year when I was with my buddies and stuff. You go there now, there's nothing there. I mean,
it's sad. There are things here, but there's a lot of, it used to be there kind of stuff, and it's disheartening. It really is. There's not a lot of people successful in being in trying to preserve this Hollywood history, because people with big money come in and the city welcomes them. There's one politician that literally was just arrested about a month ago for taking bribes to fast forward developments like this. So I'm sure that the dominoes will fall at some point. But in the meantime, we're just losing buildings like crazy. It's the landscape of Hollywood is, in the last 10 years, it's just high rises. It used to be a real small town, so it's really sad. Yeah,
it's very unfortunate, because I used to love to come out there and go to the old restaurant. I mean, there's only Musso and Frank left that I know of. I mean, in terms of old restaurants, but I love the old Hollywood stuff. Sorry, I mean to segue, but so they get back to the Spahn. Is it the Spahn Ranch? They get back to the Spahn Ranch after they left Cielo Drive. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes.
And what was going on? I mean, do we know what happened over there after?
Well, afterwards, Manson debriefed. From what I understand, told the girls to go to sleep, don't say anything to anybody. And he and Tex did a huddle, and I guess Tex probably explained what happened that night to Manson. And as far as I know, that's all that happened. I mean, both Tex and Susan Atkins were pretty jazzed up on speed that night. The other ones were supposedly sober, Krenwinkel and Kasabian. But those two are pretty jacked up on speed, so I think that attributed to what had happened that night. But I think Manson was just reviewing the evening and what had happened that night.
All right, so they wake up. They wake up now. It's you know they head over to the LaBianca's house. Talk a little bit about that, how they showed up on that house, and how did they even pick that house?
Well, the LaBianca house was next door to a house that Manson used to hang out in. One of Manson's old buddies by the name of Harold True used to rent the house next door. Manson's been there at least a half a dozen times. That's documented with witnesses. And my theory is that the rest of them were too, or a lot of them were too, because Susan Atkins was in the car with them that night. Now, the second night, the first night was the Tate murders. The second night was the LaBianca murders. The second night, Manson drove, okay? And he went up to the house next door to the LaBianca. Susan Atkins was in the car. And, Susan Atkins was in the car. Manson was behind the wheel. She was asleep. She woke up. They stopped in front of the LaBianca house, and Susan Atkins says to Manson, "Hey, isn't this a house where we dropped acid?" Manson said, "No, that's the house next door," meaning his buddy Harold True's house. So they knew the house well enough to, her wake up bleary-eyed and recognize it. So Manson didn't want to go into a house that could be traced back to him, so he went one house over. He went up the side driveway and tied up the LaBiancas and left and told Tex and the others to go in, and that's what they did. So why they chose that? I mean, there's so many theories about what had happened. Mrs. LaBianca had a daughter named Susan, who I'm confident knew Tex Watson back then. And she's the one that went to Tex's parole hearing more than once to testify for his release, saying, I forgive him.
What's up with her? What's up with her?
Well, I don't know, but tell you, out of anyone that's involved in this case, I couldn't care less about talking to anyone in this case, any of the killers. But she's someone I wish I could speak to and be sure the answers were sincere, because I think she's got a lot of information that would be useful.
Now, did her daughter get murdered?
Yeah, that happened a couple of months ago in Denver, stabbed to death. That's crazy. Unfortunate. And the daughter had a strong resemblance to Rosemary LaBianca. It was really something.
Now, again, Lino LaBianca, he was the owner of the grocery stores, or was he just a general manager? In other words, were they well-off people? Were they well-off people?
10% ownership.
Okay.
Yeah, his mother was the majority stock owner.
Okay.
And he had been busted for embezzling, and he was paying her back. And Mr. LaBianca, I don't mean to talk.
Right.
These are just facts, but he had associations with organized crime. He was several $100,000 in debt, gambling debts. He had a lot of baggage, Mr. LaBianca did. But he was 10% owner of the Gateway supermarkets. There were 9 of them around Los Angeles at the time.
So they were well off, you would say.
Yeah, reasonably.
Okay.
In fact, Mr. LaBianca was brought up in that house practically. Both Mr. and Mrs. LaBianca moved to another house not far away that used to be owned by the Disneys, Mr. Walt Disney actually, and they sold that house and they were going to move to another house. But instead, Mr. LaBianca moved into a house that his mother had recently passed away. So it was a family house, and they were only going to be there for a short period of time, and ended up, what happened.
So Scott, again, I'm sorry, I want to circle back. So the LaBiancas are coming back from maybe a party or something. They stop at a newspaper stand. Mm-hmm. And right. I just want to set the scene for my audience in terms of what was going on after the Sharon Tate murders. In terms of security, people were nervous, scared, obviously locking doors. They never did that before. And
right. Well, the LaBiancas had no idea. They were on the road all day. They went to Lake Isabella, a couple of hours from here, to pick up Mrs. LaBianca's son and daughter, actually. Susan as well. Now, Frank, the 15-year-old son, decided to stay an extra night. They were water skiing that week. The LaBiancas owned a boat. So they dropped them off earlier in the week. That Saturday night, they went to Lake Isabella to bring them both home. Frank decided to stay. The Frank Jr., the 15-year-old, stayed another night. and they came back to L.A. with Susan. They dropped Susan off and bought a newspaper, and the headline of the newspaper were the Tate murder, Sharon Tate and 4 others killed. So that was the first they'd heard of it, about the murders, since they've been on the road all day. So they were shaken up because over the past year their house had been broken into several times and nothing major was ever taken. A watch one time, I think a wallet maybe, and you know, they were concerned because the killing seemed so very random. And now with the fact that we knew that Manson hung out next door and they did their little creepy crawl thing, I'm confident that they'd been in their house before, Manson had.
So, like I said about what was going on around L.A. and people, on edge and people buying guns and things like that. So there's a boat. So Mr. LaBianca's boat was in the front of the house. Okay.
Right. Yeah. He would usually put it away,
right,
back it up the driveway. But they got home at like 2 a.m, so he just figured I'll do it tomorrow. So he left the car down at the end of the driveway with the boat.
Right. So like I said, people were nervous. So the son shows up. Instead of just going and walking up the driveway and going home, he's nervous because, like you said, the father never leaves the boat in front of the house. He always puts it up the driveway.
Right, and the lights were off in the house. It was only 10 p.m. and the shades were drawn.
Right.
So there was it was something that was disconcerting to him. And I guess he knocked on a window and called out, and no one answered. So he got creeped out, and that's when he called his sister.
And they knocked on somebody's doors, 2 doors or 3 doors.
That's right. Well, the sister and her boyfriend, Joe Dorgan, who used to hang out with Manson, it's thick. I mean, pages and pages.
Yeah, there's so many layers.
Unravels like, yes. So they, Frank, the 15-year-old, disconcerted, uncomfortable with going in the house, walked a couple of blocks to a burger joint, called his sister. Her and her boyfriend picked them up, and Frank and Susan's boyfriend went in the house and discovered the body. So they ran screaming down the driveway. They crossed the street and got to an apartment and asked them to call the police. And actually, the first apartment they got to wouldn't let him in and called the police and said, "I've got crazy kids out here." So they went to a second apartment and they called the police, and they were taken seriously.
So you said that the son, the sister, and the sister's boyfriend discovered their parents. Who discovered the Sharon Tate and her party?
Well, it would have been Mrs. Chapman, Mrs. Winifred Chapman, who was their housekeeper, and she showed up to work about 8:30 that morning. So they were killed, roughly between 12:15 and 1 a.m., and she arrived at 8:30 a.m., and she was the one who discovered the bodies. And she ran, again, another hysterical, running out the gates and pounding on doors all the way down Cielo Drive to get someone to call the police.
Scott, you actually interviewed, but the name, his name, I forget the name, the officer who pulled over Charles Manson.
Right. I found out through a friend that he had,
because Manson said he had an alibi that night.
Right. Manson said he was out of town.
Okay,
the night before the Tate murders. And so this police officer had the citation that he had issued Manson in town, not in Los Angeles proper, but nearby, the day before. So it was his citation that blew Manson's alibi away. Yeah.
Interesting. So Manson's actually at the LaBianca's house, and where did they go after?
Well, Manson actually, when he told Tex and the girls to go in, he took off. And he drove to Venice, and supposedly Venice, is a oceanside little town here. And the story goes that they were going to murder someone else there, and they were purposely taken to the wrong apartment by Linda Kasabian. So, but in the meantime, Tex and the girls, Leslie and Pat Crumwinkle, after killing the LaBiancas, they hitchhiked back to the Spahn Ranch.
Yeah, that was Sadim. Was he an actor or something? I think
he was. He was an Iranian. He was from Iran, and he was an actor. Saladar Nazim was his name, I think. And And yeah, Linda Kasabian and Pat Krenwinkel, I believe, had sex with him one night, and for some reason Manson thought he'd be a good person to kill. And but Linda Kasabian, as the story goes, took them to the wrong door. It's interesting because what if the guy at the wrong door was killed? It's just like.
Now, did she do that? Would she do that purposely? You think?
She would say so. Yeah. There's so many layers to this. Right. But yeah, that's the official story.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Scott. Lino LaBianca, like we said, was a gambler, and we said he might have had some ties to the underworld. And the police initially believed that maybe the mob might have been involved. Is that true?
It was a thought, certainly.
It was a thought. Okay.
And his first wife, Alice LaBianca, who he had children with, said something. I don't know. The term was that she used. He has no ties to the organization, or something like that. It was like a ding ding. There was like it was an odd choice of words, but they do say that he may have had associations with organized crime. Yeah.
So obviously there's a big investigation going on. Everybody, like I said, everybody's on pins and needles. Sales of attack dogs go up, guns, security cameras, everything. Everybody's scared to hell, literally.
Right. Nobody knew. For 4 months, they had they made no arrests, and it was 1969, the hottest summer, for many years. And people, the reason I think this struck such a chord with people is because, a lot of baby boomers were around that time, and all of a sudden, this hot day, nobody had air conditioning like they do now. Everyone dies, but back then, to shut with your doors and windows and lock them at night in this hot summer, stifling heat, because someone might come crawling in your windows and kill you. And it happened. Abigail Folger was reading a book in bed, and within 30 minutes was on the front lawn of the house with 28 stab wounds. So it seemed so very random, and it scared the hell out of everybody.
Right. This must have been an amazing time to be alive in terms. So like you said, 4 months. Cara Wayne, a lot of my audience don't know who she is. Look her up. But her boyfriend was a suspect right off the bat. Ed Durston. Is it Durston?
Yeah. No, there's something I can't go into because I don't know much about that one. He's got odd connections.
Yeah, he was shady.
And I can't really comment on that. This is I don't know.
Right, because he was with Linkletter's daughter at the same time. All right, anyways, he was a shady character.
Yeah. He's got two dodgy cases for sure. And there were a lot of people, Angela Lansbury's daughter had associations with the family. Dean Martin's daughter.
Really?
So they were, they were hippies, and to her credit, Angela Lansbury, as soon as this went down, she took her kids and moved back to Ireland. So she's like, I'm out of here, and so it was something. So
again, like we say, 4 months. What broke the case? What broke it wide open and led them to the Manson family?
Well, it was Susan Atkins really that solved it. She was in prison for something completely different, and happened to blab to her cellmate, guess what we did? And her cellmate was a woman by the name of Virginia Graham, who I've since become good friends with, and I did there's a 90-minute interview I did with her on YouTube. And Virginia was in prison for it was actually parole violation. She had passed a bad check, and she got 5 years for that, for a bad check. And Susan Atkins was bragging to her. Now, people in prison tend to brag, and Susan Atkins was this 19-year-old cute little girl. Virginia said she was doing somersaults down the middle of the dormitory. And Susan decided to confide in her. She said she's got a trusting face or something like that. Now, the interesting thing is that Virginia, one of her best friends, worked for Jay Sebring, and Virginia had actually been in the house on Cielo Drive when she was looking for a house to rent for herself. So Susan Atkins tells her, and Virginia's like, girl, you just got to shut up. You're going to get in trouble talking like that, because she figured she was full of it. But then, so after a while, Virginia says, okay, describe the house. And Susan said, okay, well, you walk in the front door and there are these beams. And Virginia said, as soon as she said beams, I knew she was telling the truth. And it's another kind of complicated story because Virginia, there's the snitches get stitches thing. So Virginia told a friend of hers in prison, whose name was Ronnie Howard, Veronica Lopez is her real name. She told Ronnie, this girl, maybe you want to pal up to her because you can get this reward money that was offered. It was like a $25,000 reward. So Ronnie Howard did get this information, and Virginia was, I don't know how deep you want to go into this. Virginia was like a party girl, and she was friends with Sinatra, and she was friends with a lot of high-ranking,
She has a book
players.
out. Doesn't she have a book out?
What, sorry?
Does she have a book out?
Yeah,
Okay.
Manson, Sinatra, and Me.
Okay. Sorry.
And that is her book, and it's available at dearlydepartedtours.com. But autographed too. But Virginia was pals with a lot of high up people, including Sinatra. And after a while, the family started doing things to stay relevant. They would drop little shocking facts, like that one time they crawled on their hands and knees and said they were going to crawl from Sunset Boulevard to the courthouse. They did ridiculous things,
right.
They released a hit list. And you remember, Virginia told her friend Veronica or Ronnie to, maybe you can get after this reward money. So she palled up. Ronnie did with Susan Atkins that got the story. Well, this hit list came out, and they said that they were going to, hang Frank Sinatra upside down and skin him alive and make purses. Now, it sounds ridiculous now, but back then, nobody knew it was true or not. And that's when Virginia said, that's it, I got to say something. So between Virginia and Ronnie Howard, the two prisoners that Susan was in prison with, the two of them were the ones that broke the case.
Wow, fascinating. Officer Willis, by the way. Officer Willis.
A really nice guy. And he had never been interviewed before I spoke to him, which was shocking, really. He didn't even get to testify at the trial.
Interesting. So obviously the cops come in. Now, where was Manson
Wills.
found?
Actually, I'm sorry.
Wills?
His name was Wills because they spelled it wrong in the book.
I even wrote it down, Willis. Sorry. Where was Manson found when they arrested him?
Well, when the heat was on, they left town and they went out to Death Valley to this place called the Barker Ranch, which was near a town called Ballarat in Death Valley. I mean, and when you say this thing is off the grid, it's totally off the grid. It's 20 miles from any people, 90 minutes drive from any phone signal.
Jeez.
And that's where they took off to. And initially they were arrested for auto theft. It was an auto theft ring that they were actually busted for. And Manson was hiding in a little cabinet when they raided the ranch. And they busted him, and it was after that things just, Susan Atkins really started her blabbermouth business, and they already had everybody in custody for something else at that point. I mean, they looked at Manson a long time before he was actually busted. And it's ironic, too, because, the day that the Tate murders made the news, at the Spawn Ranch, they were raided for something completely different, for auto theft. So on the headline of the paper, Sharon Tate murdered, one of the same stories on that same page was this group of hippies being arrested at the Spawn Ranch. So it was a really fascinating thing. I mean, it's unbelievable, really.
Yeah, like we said, there's so many different layers to this, and so many different stories. I mean, your documentary, 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter, was fantastic. I mean, he was hiding in, like you say, some cabinet, and his hair was sticking out.
Yeah. Just so happened, the police officer, and I've been in that little room that he was arrested in. It's tiny, and that cabinet was even more tiny. So the police officer kind of peeked in, and Manson was only 5'4", I think, and so he's kind of squeezed into that little cabinet, and they saw his hair poking out, and he happened to look it up, and Charlie came tumbling out. So that place is burned down now too. The Barker Ranch that burned about 10 years ago.
Wow. So obviously there's a trial. They all guilty. They get the death penalty. Then they get rid of the death penalty. What's the status of everybody now as we speak? Obviously we know Charles Manson passed away. What's going on with the rest of the family?
Well, the rest of them, Tex and Leslie and Krenwinkel and Bobby Beausoleil, Susan Atkins is dead too. She died in prison of a brain cancer or something like that, brain tumor. But since the death penalty was overturned and ruled unconstitutional, which is the California way. I mean, I mean, I shouldn't laugh because if I was one of the victims' families, I'd be furious. I am furious, just but they're eligible for parole. So now, the interesting thing is most people think that Leslie Van Houten, who had stabbed Rosemary LaBianca 16 times, technically after she was already dead, though Leslie could not have known that, it's true that she did not cause anyone's death. Leslie, she had her own attorney during the original trial, and her attorney died mysteriously, and her conviction was thrown out, and she was given a second trial. Leslie was actually out. She worked as a secretary at a law firm for about 6 months. She was given a second trial. The second trial, it was a hung jury. Leslie was given a third trial, and in the third trial, she was sentenced to life in prison with a chance of parole in 7 years, making Leslie eligible for parole in 1979. So technically, she was not. She was given a life sentence, but it was overturned, or she was given a death sentence, and it was overturned. And she's been eligible since 1979, and she comes up every few years, and she's been approved by the parole board the last few times. But the governor has the ability to veto that.
Right, this was recent because I remember reading something about it.
He hasn't vetoed it yet. We're right in the middle of it right now, where the parole board has said, yes, she's eligible, and now it's up to the governor. And who knows? Who knows what he's going to do? Who knows? It's a crapshoot here. They're releasing prisoners, about 3,000 recently because of coronavirus. They just released a woman. Anyway, I don't want to get into all that, but it's quite possible Leslie gets out. Not probable, but it's possible.
Amazing. In Tex Watson, obviously, he's in for life, and
and he gets thrown up for parole too. Texas fathered 4 children while incarcerated for murdering people, and I find that ludicrous. And so did Doris Tate, Sharon's mother, who went to the parole hearings and won the rights for victims to go head-to-head with these killers. So when they say, I'm really sorry for killing Sharon Tate, I'd like to get out. And Mrs. Tate could look them right in the eye and say, when am I coming out? When's my baby coming out of her casket?
Right.
So she got conjugal visits taken away from prisoners, from killers. So Mrs. Tate got things done. She really did. I have a lot of respect for her.
Good for her. This has been great. Scott, have you been at, you must have been at David Oman's house, Oman?
Yeah, sure. David's a friend. I was up there a couple days ago.
I think I might have him on next week, I think. I might have him on next week.
Good. He's a fascinating person, and his house is insane. For the first time, I've seen a lot of odd experiences paranormal. In his house, the stuff I saw was... It was crazy.
He's doing some type of on the anniversary. He's doing some type of he's doing some big thing. I might check it out. I don't know.
Personally, I think that whole area is bad news. Personally, I think it's if there was ever, and I'm not, I go for things. I'm not a dramatic exaggerator. There's enough drama in real life. I don't need to exaggerate. So I will say, I really truly think that whole canyon is cursed. Yeah. I do think this is like proper Native American stuff, burial ground stuff, and the stuff that you could name, I can name from Sunset Boulevard all the way up to Mulholland. People who have been associated with it have died mysteriously, have died in Benedict Canyon mysteriously. You mentioned Yvette Vickers a little while ago. She was Benedict Canyon. George Reeves, Superman. John Ritter, Elizabeth Montgomery, Peter Finch.
Was Entwistle too? Peg Entwistle?
No, Peg Entwistle was Beechwood Canyon. That was right in Hollywood, below the Hollywood sign.
Yeah.
But Benedict is just above Beverly Hills.
I had a lady actually related to you. I'm not related to you, but she said, I don't know. She sent me a message and said she said she has Sharon Tate's bed. Hello.
Oh, sure. I know her. Yeah.
You know her?
Yeah.
You know her? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if she was blowing smoke.
It wouldn't be Sharon Tate's bed. It would be Abigail Folger's bed.
Okay. I didn't know if she was blowing smoke. I wanted to mention that to you.
No. It was up for auction a few years ago. In fact, I met her again at the Sharon Tate auction. And when I picked up a couple of things. In fact, there's another auction this coming Saturday. GWS Auctions is auctioning off one of Sharon's sets of eyelashes and a couple of other things that belong to her. So it's going to be interesting.
You can get that. That'll go with Yvette Vickers' nail polish. Scott, real quick.
I have a paper towel roll holder. I mean, I have so much stuff from her.
Yeah, no, your stuff is amazing. I see what you're doing. I love what you do, and you should be commended for it because you are like, I know you don't like the term, but you're a historian. You're a Hollywood historian in terms of for the dark side. You know what I mean?
I'll take the historian thing. Expert is when it makes me kind of blanch because I know a little about a lot of things. There are people that know a lot more than I do. I just like to gather it and make it into a more pleasant little package.
Yeah, well,
it's a little bit more easy.
Whatever they know, they got it from you. Whatever they learned, they got from you.
Oh, I wouldn't say that, but thank you for saying that. It's a high compliment.
Scott, so tell everybody what you got going on in terms of I know your tour and stuff like now is on hold, but in terms of your YouTube and everything, because it's fascinating stuff.
Thank you. I have there's our podcast that we put out every couple of weeks, the Julia Departed podcast. We did the last one on the movie Grease and all the weird things that happen during the production to the stars of the show. The next one we're doing is on the movie Jaws, having to do with just the odd things that happen on the set and the odd stories regarding the actors and a lot of their deaths and things that happened during the filming of the movie. The one thing that I'm working on the most is my YouTube page called Julia Parted Online. And I literally just today, a couple of hours ago, uploaded the video about Stephen Parent, the young man who was killed at the Tate House, who just happened to be up there that night visiting the caretaker. And he's the one that's often ignored, but I went out to El Monte where he was from. I showed his house. I showed his high school and where he worked and talked a bit about him as a human being rather than just a black and white picture of a kid in a true crime novel. And the one I'm working on right now is about Jay Sebring. I'm from Detroit originally, and so is Jay. So I went out to Jay's old place, his grade school, where his Michigan funeral took place. So I'm gathering information about just people that are so well known, but you didn't know these things about them. I don't know if you saw the Lennon sisters one that I did a couple of weeks ago, but the Lennon sisters were these beautiful.
I didn't see that one. I got to catch up.
Okay, the Lennon sisters were beautiful, sisters that sang beautifully on the Lawrence Welk Show, and in 1969, their father was murdered. I figured it out. 108 hours after Sharon Tate, their father was gunned down by a stalker in a parking lot of a golf course where he worked. So it's but it happened so closely in time to the Tate murders that people thought they may have been related. So it was, it's just so the stories are just bizarre little forgotten stories about Hollywood.
Right, and you do a great job keeping it alive, and I love it. And when I see you two a new interview come up on my alert, I say, "Oh, Scott's got one up." Oh yeah, I'm all over this. Because it's you do keep it alive, and I like to do a lot of that myself. I get a lot of the old Hollywood actors on and things like that. And so it's great what you do, and again, you should be commended for it, and keep up the good work. And so you do have a lot of big audience going out there, and hopefully when that tour gets going again, hopefully soon. And I highly recommend it for a lot of my audience out there.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on. I love being on. I love your show, and I appreciate it very much so. And thanks.
You got it, Scott. I'm going to blast this on all your stuff on my social media as well. And so be safe, and thank you so much for what you do. And keep up the good work, Scott. We'll talk to you down the road.
Thanks a lot, buddy. Take care. Thanks.
Are you going over David's house?
I'm supposed to be. Yeah, I have it planned to. Yes.
Oh, cool. All right, cool. Maybe I'll tune in. All right, Scott. Thanks so much. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Great guy. All right. There you have it, guys. That's Scott Michaels. That was a great interview about the man. And if anybody knows the inside details about the Manson murders, it's Scott Michaels. Trust me when I tell you, guys. I know he doesn't like to hear that, but he does know. He does know what he's talking about. And again, guys, check out his podcast, the Dearly Departed podcast. You can find it up on iTunes. Follow his YouTube channel at the Dearly Departed podcast. Like he said, he just posted a new one, and it's about the Manson murders, and he does great stuff. All obscure actors. that you'd never even heard of, like Yvette Vickers. She was in a Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. She was also in Playboy. A lot of people didn't know that. I believe that was 1954. I could be wrong.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, check that one out, Justin. That's a good. Yeah, she ended up. She was mummified at the end. She became like a recluse. I mean, whatever. She kept to herself, and for almost a year, nobody found her, and they found her. She was in a mummified state. Yeah, it's crazy stuff, and. Yeah, but Scott is he's the man, and check out dailydepartedtours.com, guys. He is check out. Highly recommend this weekend. Obviously, it's the gruesome anniversary of the Manson murders, but check out his documentary. I checked it out the other night. 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter. It's free online. Just type that in Google, and it comes right up. And fascinating. He goes to the scenes of the crimes, and he goes to where the guy Tex Watson threw the gun out the window. Out the window, and went down like a little hill and ended up in like that was somebody's backyard. And he interviewed that guy. It's just crazy stuff. And go check that out. 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter. And that's it, guys. Follow my YouTube channel, guys. Real Talk with the Hollywood Kid, REEL. Some great content up there. And this one's going to be up there by hopefully tonight. And we'll get that one up on the board. And check that out. Share that. Like it. Comment it. Tell your family. Tell your friends. Tell all your enemies. And that's what we do here, guys. Another great show. Another great guest next week. And that is it, guys. And please be safe. Do what you're supposed to be doing out there. Wearing your mask, your goggles, when your face mask or whatever you got to wear. Your
full bubble.
Your bubble, hazmat suits, because it is no joke. And, so be safe, do the right thing. And that's it, guys. Again, check out Scott Michaels. Google Scott Michaels if you're into this type of stuff, because I love this kind of stuff. And if you see my YouTube channel, you'll know why. And that's it, Justin. That's it, brother.
Yeah, another one in the bag.
Another one in the books, and another one is going to be blasting out there tonight on YouTube. Get on my YouTube channel, Real Talk with the Hollywood Kid. That's it, guys. We'll see you next Saturday, and again, be safe, and we are out. Bam!
He's not normal.
Pretty girl, pretty girl. Cease to exist. Just come and say you love me. Give up your world. Come on, you can't be. I'm your kind, oh, your kind, I can see. Walk on, I love you, pretty girl. My life is yours. Yeah, you can have my
You take drugs,
word.
Danny? Every day. Good.
Oh, Mike!
Okay, everybody, that's a wrap.